We're really excited to talk with our guest speakers. My name is Neerja Arvimathan. I'm the director of the Ginsberg Center at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and have the privilege of also serving on the TRUCEN Leadership Committee with Bobby and a bunch of wonderful other folks. One of the things we do at TRUCEN at the Research University Community Engagement Network is we try to bring together folks to learn from each other. We really see it as we're all in this doing different aspects, doing wonderful work, and we want to learn about it. And this topic today was identified by you all as something that you wanted to learn more about. So the broad umbrella topic is designing intentional institutional partnerships. And we really saw this as an opportunity to learn about at different scales and at different types of institutions, how do people work across units, across within an institution and even outside of an institution to build equitable, long-lasting, sustainable partnerships. So we're really lucky. The three folks that are talking with us today really have very different perspectives and even roles on their campuses. They'll share more about that. We'll give each of them about almost 10 minutes to talk, and then we'll shift into breakout groups because we found that people really love the chance to have a more in-depth conversation with each of the speakers. So you'll learn a little bit about their context, their situation, and then you'll get a chance to ask your own own questions. So we'll start off with Glenn Sarasalati.
Well, it's an honor to be here today, and thank you so much, Nirja and Bobby, for convening us today. When I saw Nirja's email go out looking for presenters to speak on this topic several months ago, my first thought was thinking about the work that I've been involved with across institutions. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today, is talking about those intentional relationships that we've been seeking to build here in the greater Rochester region of New York. And so I'm going to share a bit about that with you. I serve as Assistant Dean and Director, as you can see on this slide, of the Center for Community Engagement at the University of Rochester. And I'm going to start out by talking a little bit more about my institutional, but also the broader community and geographic context within which I operate. For those who might not be familiar with the University of Rochester, we're a mid-sized private research university established here in Rochester, New York in 1850. And we are a private research university, not part of the State University of New York system. We have just over 11,000 students enrolled at the university across 6 academic divisions. Just over 6,000 of those students are undergraduate students. And our schools include our arts and sciences, engineering, a graduate school of education and human development, business school, the Eastman School of Music, which you may have heard of, one of the top conservatories in the country, a school of nursing, and a school of medicine and dentistry at our sizable academic medical center affiliated with the university. And largely due to the growth of the medical center, as well as the educational wing of the university became the region's largest employer in the early 2000s, around 2004. And I'll say more about the evolution of that and its consequences for the greater Rochester community. Currently, I believe we're either the 5th or the 6th largest private employer in all of New York State, which is still boggles my mind, given the other parts of New York State. The photo you see on your screen here depicts a photo from a couple of years ago of the staff, my colleagues in the Center for Community Engagement, which was established in 2005 within our Student Life Division at the university. And historically, it focused on serving undergraduate students, which are located primarily in our School of Arts and Sciences and School of Engineering. As of 2025, we're now situated within academic affairs in the provost's office and have purview across the entire university, including all 6 academic divisions and graduate students as well as undergraduates. And we work closely with the university's Vice President for Community Partnerships, Dr. Sean Nelms. And Rochester, in terms of the context, if you're not familiar with it, it's a beautiful time to visit Rochester. It's always a beautiful time to visit Rochester, and I invite you to come. We're a mid-sized city on the southern shore of Lake Ontario, characterized and proud of our progressive social history, featuring figures such as Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass, who did some of their social change work here in Rochester. And Rochester also has a history of high-tech industry. In the mid-20th century, in particular, Rochester's economy was dominated by three large corporations, Xerox, Bausch and Lomb, and Kodak. And those, suffice to say, the economy has gone through a transformation over the past 50 years as those large corporations have waned. And as I mentioned earlier, the university became the largest employer in the region in the early 2000s. And as part of that concentration, and even part of the flourishing of those corporations, Rochester came to have a high concentration of poverty in selected urban and as well as some surrounding rural communities. Um, and by some measures, as of within the past decade, some of the highest concentration of poverties in across the country. And I also have neighborhoods with high concentration of wealth, and so not uncharacteristic of other Rust Belt cities, lots of disparities socioeconomically. And so this context gave rise to folks at the area colleges and universities coming together to establish what we call the Rochester Regional Network of Colleges and Universities. And even before there was any sort of formal convening of that network, there was a history or precursors of collaboration. And the photo that you see depicted on the screen here is actually from earlier this week when we took students out to orient them to the community as part of our summer urban fellowship program and had a chance encounter with two U.S. representatives, Joe Morelli and Sarah McBride, on the rooftop overlooking the scenic falls in downtown Rochester. But it was through that summer urban fellowship program that the university began collaborating with other area colleges. And that collaboration was based especially on personal relationships that leaders at the colleges and universities had with one another. And that led to the formation of a more formal network. And as you can see on the timeline on the screen, that network gradually grew over the years to include seven and then eventually eight area colleges and universities. If time allows, I'll show you a map of those in a little bit. Um, Also, a key factor in the development of our collaboration was the formation. In addition to our summer fellowship program, we launched a postgraduate fellowship program that we call Rochester Youth Year. And we've been fortunate since 2008 to receive an AmeriCorps Vista grant to fund that fellowship program. And that has also come to fund, when funding was available, our summer fellowship program as well. During the pandemic, we expanded the network to encompass other national service programs in the area. And we've also added alumni of our programs to serve on our in our network, which essentially has served as an advisory board for our fellowship programs. And some of those alumni have gone on to work and be employed at um, their host organizations or other local organizations. But the intention behind this network was to counteract bright flight and retain talented recent graduates in the community, to build community and campus partnerships with the area colleges and universities, and to foster civic leadership among our recent graduates. And one more thing I want to say before I move on to this next slide and talk about some of our success stories is just that. Our structure, we meet 4 to 5 times a year as a network, and we do have subgroups that convene in between those meetings as well to work on specific projects. But it is a programmatic focus in addition to a relational focus in our collaboration. I'm going to feature on this side some of the outcomes that we've achieved and outputs as well. We've had over 400 students and recent graduates participate in our summer and full year fellowship programs. We've partnered with over 100 organizations. You see the logos for some of those partners on the screen here. Our fellows have generated more than $10 million in cash and in-kind resources over the past 15 plus years. and have mobilized more than 13,000 community volunteers. I do want to talk a little bit about the nature, just of a small number of these partnerships. As you can see, some of them are with our city school district. I've spotlighted in the upper right of the slide the school district's largest, what was its largest high school east, which undertook between 2015 and 2025 an educational partnership organization arrangement with the University of Rochester, and we deployed recent graduates to support that effort. The city of Rochester and the surrounding county of Monroe launched with support from the state and federal support as well, launched an anti-poverty initiative going back to the mid 20 teens, and we've been integral to that. In fact, we have an alum who continues to work at the Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative. Currently, the local leaders, as well as New York State Parks, are designing in the design phase of a new state park surrounding the High Falls in downtown Rochester. And we have fellows that are working with community partners to foster community engagement for that park, which will be unique in that it's situated in a low socioeconomic status neighborhoods that surround it. We've worked closely with the MK Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence to build their capacity. And the one that I most wanted to talk about is a partnership with the city of Rochester. And we had an alum go on to work with a Bloomberg-funded initiative, the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund in Manhattan, following her work with our fellowship program. And then she returned to Rochester, and along the way, she connected at other alums. So we had a little cluster of alums who've worked with the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund and still do in Manhattan. But the original alum returned to Rochester and now heads up Rochester's Office of Financial Empowerment. And so it's great to see that sort of capacity building happening over many years with our partnerships. A few takeaways and opportunities in my overview here. This work is relational, and so it's, as I said earlier, it sort of was founded upon some personal relationships that colleagues, who created my time in this leadership role, that these colleagues had with one another, and prompted them to get together and seek out and foster these sorts of collaborations. But of course, folks have moved on, and there have been transitions over time, and so maintaining those relationships in a durable way has been important, and we've managed to do that. And I can talk more about that in the breakout rooms. My colleagues and counterparts at the other area colleges and universities have commented that having a programmatic focus can be really useful. The background photo on this slide is actually a photo that I took at a collaborative effort with the other area colleges honoring Dr. Martin Luther King National Day of Service last January. And that's one example of where we've tried to work together in the spirit of one community. Our federal funding source with our AmeriCorps grant has been instrumental in giving us funding that programmatic focus and giving us that support. At the same time, it's not an institutional priority for any of our organizations, and so we do run into capacity limitations, and seeking out additional funding to support this work is needed too. So I think I've reached my time limit, and I will turn off my screen share and turn the floor back to Nirsha.
Thanks so much. And you can see Jen, that is not me, it is Jen on the screen. And so we're going to transition over. So what I asked, just to be clear, as Bobby shared, we've got the notes there. So if people want to have access to slides, we'll be able to do that. And also, we've asked people to share a little bit about a program, their takeaways, and then also anything they'd like to share in terms of advice or challenges they experience, because we know the proof is in the pudding of actually getting the work done. So that is what we're doing. So Jen, off to you.
Thank you. Did everyone see my slides? Yeah, great. So I'm Jen Davison. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the project director of community engagement at the University of Washington. The context for my title will become clear as part of this presentation. I'm going to talk about how the university campuses of UW have approached intentional design of cross-campus systems to benefit community partners. And the main points that I will touch on today are honor context, use a community engaged approach and find priorities that can inspire co-creation. So if you take nothing else away, and that's what I'm hoping you'll take away from this conversation. I've been at the UW for about 16 years. Came in as a scientist, but I've always been focused on connecting academia and society more meaningfully, first as a scientist, and then building partner capacity, building individuals and then institutional capacity for community, working in community. And so my question for today's conversation is, how do you improve partner experience across 3 very different campuses? So when you think about University of Washington, you probably think about the Seattle campus, started in 1861, very large, very high research productivity. But we also have 2 other campuses, Bothell campus and Tacoma campus, are both established in 1989. And they both have a much more community-oriented mandate and culture. So very different contexts. And of course, many of our partners partner with more than one of us because we're really only 100 miles from end to end away from each other. And but for partners, they don't necessarily see the different campuses, but they do see the disjunct way in which we show up. And so our partners have to do our project management for us oftentimes. So how do we improve this? Now, this timeline here is incomplete and not to scale, but it is a representation of the infrastructure that the University of Washington has in place and has put in place over time to support community engagement, or CE. And by infrastructure, I don't mean like bridges. I mean capacities, policies, programs, processes, positions, all of the P words that are the systems and structures to support community engagement. And you can see here on the left, we started in 1993. The different campuses have different colors of font here, but really, especially right around the time that we undertook our first self-assessment to be considered as Carnegie Community Engaged Campuses, the amount of infrastructure, and particularly tri-campus infrastructure, has really increased. And that was very intentional. The Carnegie assessment, as many of us know, is a really huge driver of institutional support for community engagement. And when we did that, we connected all 3 campuses to align our assessments, our campus-specific assessments, as appropriate and as it would benefit to understand how we could benefit community partners. That was really the first time that the 3 campuses started to collaborate on community engagement. We also held partner focus groups, and they were also telling us about how cross-campus alignment would be helpful. And so the recommendations, the assessment and then the recommendations from our Carnegie really led to greater ability for our institution and campuses to provide specific support for community engagement, which actually, so let's see, this is our Carnegie assessment that happened, the first one. And then this, again, has led to a lot of institutional work. And then it actually led to a $4 million gift using the Carnegie recommendations as a fundraising pitch to catalyze community engagement by building tri-campus systems and structures. And so I've led this project for the past 4 years. That's why I'm called a project director, because there's not a UW-wide Office of Community Engagement. So I've been leading this effort to improve our community engagement infrastructure since 2022. And the first thing I did was pull together a tri-campus group of people who could work with me, because it needed to be a community engaged approach in order for it to be robust, to be innovative, and to be trustworthy across our communities inside and outside of the UW. So this is one iteration of the tri-campus community engagement team. It's always been about faculty and staff in both leadership positions as well as individual contributors across the 3 campuses who could really work together on figuring out how to build institutional capacity for community engagement, whatever that means. Now, this is where we really had to lean into community engagement to build the infrastructure. We had to build a shared language because the 3 campuses didn't work together previously. And there's a lot of history and context that's of the Seattle campus kind of bowling over the other two campuses, and the other two campuses having a lot of strong community partnerships, but not necessarily a lot of visibility. So we had to build shared language. What do we even mean by tri-campus infrastructure? We had to build shared agreements on behavior, shared understanding, and a shared vision, and really had to build a lot of trust, because it's been a very messy process to decide what do we want to invest this $4 million in order to increase our ability to show up effectively for community partners. So we had a lot of team norms around uncertainty and generative tension and multiple truths existing, which should sound familiar to folks who work in community engagement. So this is the timeline of our project. As I mentioned, the first year was really about trust building. So this is broken into 4 chapters here. The first chapter, the first academic year, was really about building team norms, mission, vision, and values for the team. And then landscape assessments of each campus's strengths, capacities, needs, and priorities. And then we also co-created a strategic framework based on things like organizational capacity building, institutional change, DEI, and community engagement, healthy practices, to help us to have an agreed decision framework on how to spend money. We had then identified tri-campus priorities, and then we had to figure out what do we do with the money in order to make the priorities happen. So again, a lot of collaboration. Chapter 2 was really about bringing more people in, because finally we had a stable understanding of what we were trying to do together, that we could bring community partners and other faculty and staff into the work. Chapter 3 was really about launching pilot infrastructure into the wild, little seedlings of cool stuff. That was last academic year. A lot of trainings and platforms. We launched our data platform. And then now we are in chapter 4, which is really about implementing, improving, scaling, integrating, and sustaining. As I mentioned, it's had to be community engaged. So this is just a visual of our roles and teams. It's been the goal has been to create robust governance, but nimble enough and evolving every year to meet the needs of the project. So we've had a working group, and I'm the project director. I'm accountable to the president. And we've had project champions who are leaders on campus, on the 3 campuses, who could advocate for our work. We've had a community of practice of over 400 people who we engage, who've opted in to be engaged on this conversation. Students have been participating with us and collaborating on input on key priorities that we've been working on. And we've had a community advisory council as well. And all of this is, of course, in the context of the larger UW community and the larger communities of which we are all a part. So just kind of recognizing that we've had dozens of people directly collaborating, again, taking a community engaged approach. Now I want just a couple of sentences about the Community Advisory Council. This was a really great opportunity for us as 3 campuses to be intentional about designing what this infrastructure was by developing and inviting a diverse group of community partners that connected across one or more of the campuses, and that represented lots of different engagement types, sectors, size, resourcing, location, focus, demographics, lived experience, and relationship. And so these partners worked with us for 6 months. We invited them with a very specific scope and estimated hours and compensation, so that our churn was not going to get in. We wanted to make sure that our churn wasn't going to overburden our partners. So, but the advisory council was a wonderful addition to our teams for developing how could we be collaborating across the 3 campuses. Now, my third point was find the priorities that can invite co-creation. Now, these are called priorities, not goals, because they allow for emergence. The word priority allows for emergence and progress instead of prescriptive perfectionism. And all of these are interrelated, but for this talk in particular, priority 7 has been a keystone for us. So reminding ourselves, we are not trying to build process or anything just for the sake of building process. We're doing it to benefit community partners. And if it doesn't benefit community partners, we're not going to do it. But these are the 7 things we've been working on for the past 3 years. And again, these have been built by understanding the history of each of the campuses, by coming together and listening to each other and being very intentional and engaged, and then moving from there. So each of these, this is the list of the same priorities, and each of these priorities now has a whole bunch of deliverables attached. And these are all links that you can find. And so my last slide here is about what we're doing now. So where we are now is rolling out Give Pulse, which is a UW-wide management platform for community engaged work, and that is requiring a lot of very specific conversation around how should the experience be for partners, because this is a very visible place where partners are going to experience the different campuses, and can we have it be cohesive. We're doing so a lot of the interventional work that we did, for example, the toolkit for improving community promotion and tenure, needs to continue to be socialized, especially on the Seattle campus that is so large and decentralized. The programmatic work that we've created, that we've done, including things like trainings, needs to be owned and stewarded, and we're working on that. And we've identified that we need $500,000 a year in order to support the infrastructure that we've created. And the challenge there is to ensure that the work that we've created is seen as infrastructure rather than a project. The lessons learned, first of all, trust was super important, especially with such a decentralized university. We needed to really build relationships so that we could figure out what we were going to do together. The common goal of benefiting community partners really helped us find common ground, to minimize kind of bloated or misaligned deliverables, and to define community partner participation in the project itself. As I said, UW is decentralized, and it really hinders institutional alignment and change. That's a huge lesson learned, and it's often used as an excuse to not move forward. This is just basic institutional change work, but like the people who don't like or see themselves as community engaged, bring those folks in early so that you can find more connections across the campuses. And then I'm saying this not because I am the institution-wide position, but because everyone else has also reflected that it's critical to have somebody who can hold the connections across the campuses in order to maintain that collaboration, so that you're actually truly benefiting community partners and not falling back into silos. So I'll stop. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So when I hear Jen say, it's just basic, I don't think anything you did is basic, but and I think that is what we see as the power of community engagement, right? This idea of community engagement sounds so simple in many ways, like you should partner, you should pay attention to what your community's priorities, but the doing of it is so complicated, and we see all the layers of thought and effort both Glenn and Jen have been highlighting already. And now we move on to Leanne.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining on. For me, it's a beautiful day outside. So if it is for you, I especially thank you for joining instead of being outside. So I'm Leanne Moore. I am from the University of Delaware. For those of you that aren't as familiar, University of Delaware is in the first state. We are also the smallest. We just broke 1 million people in our state. So some of your cities are significantly bigger than ours. So, University of Delaware was founded in 1743. It is a land, sea, space grant university. Between undergraduate and graduate students, we have about 24,500 students, and we have about 4,800 employees across our campuses. Now, our main campus is in Newark, Delaware. We have about 3-ish, I would say more, 2 satellite campuses, which are primarily for our associate in arts program students, and or our our Sea Grant is down at the beach. So most of our Sea Grant folks are in Southern Delaware, but you can drive our entire state in about 3 hours. So we have 10 colleges, 150 undergraduate majors, over 250 different types of graduate and post bachelor's programs at UD. And I am a part of the Community Engagement Initiative, which is an initiative out of the Provost's office. We report to the Vice Provost what is now community engagement, um, used to be for Vice Provost for Equity and Community Work. So just a little bit of background. Our office, so Community Engagement Initiative, was first formed after we got our first Carnegie classification in 2016. So the when UD decided that we wanted to go after Carnegie. It was actually an ad hoc group of faculty members that thought it was very important, and they just decided on their own to start that process. Got some buy-in from the then provost, and kind of formalized the process when Carnegie classification came through. A lot of other resources followed from the university, and the Community Engagement Initiative was founded. Um, the purpose of the initiative was and continues to be that kind of like what Jen was saying, that center place where we can streamline things, where we can systemize things, try and figure out tracking and definitions, and how do we not tap into the same community partners 1.5 million times and ask them all for different things, and then they're confused on who to go to. Not all community engagement at the University of Delaware needs to go through the Community Engagement Initiative. We're really here to build capacity, to help with professional development, introduce faculty, staff, and students at all levels to the variety of ways you can do community engaged work, whether that be community engaged partnerships and programs or community engaged scholarship through the research office. As a part of the Community Engagement Initiative, we kind of have different buckets of focus, which are represented here. So faculty and staff, that's that kind of capacity building, professional development style. For students, we have two majors, or I guess three major student programs. One is our Community Engagement Scholars course of study. It's a 4-year course of study. Shows up similar to an honors degree would, but it is in community engagement. We also have a graduate certificate in community engaged scholarship, and then we run a graduate and an undergraduate summer scholars, which is sort of like a community engaged fellowship over there each summer. We also help community partners connect to the resources they need at the university. So I see ourselves as kind of like the front door. So if you have no idea where to start, but you know you want to access the technical support or the students at the University of Delaware, but you don't know where to go, we would be the ones to help you connect to, depending on what you're looking for, the right place at the university, because it is so big. And then we have a lot of different centers or institutes at the University of Delaware that are doing a lot of the contract work, RFP response to RFPs with community organizations like nonprofits, private businesses, as well as the government within the state of Delaware, regionally and globally. So really helping them work together is what birthed the Community Engagement Council, which is really the overarching kind of advisory council to all the things that the Community Engagement Initiative does. So when the council was first formed in 2016 out of that Carnegie classification, our first knowledge-based partners were also formed. So this is across the university. A group of interdisciplinary faculty and staff were coalescing around very specific areas. So we have a partnership for public education, partnership for healthy communities, partnership for arts and culture, the Wilmington partnership, the Newark partnership, which is now completely spun off and is its own private nonprofit, and we are working to catalyze a Southern Delaware partnership as well. So these knowledge-based partnerships were incubated both financially, but also with staff through the Community Engagement Initiative, because the council has a variety of faculty and staff on it from different places at the University of Delaware. So that's kind of like an overarching 10,000-foot view of the Community Engagement Initiative, but I want to focus in on the Community Engagement Council. So this has existed again since 2016. It is made up of faculty, staff, and some students, although the folks that stay on it year round and year to year, usually it's around 40 folks, are the faculty and staff that are representing those different centers or institutes that I mentioned that are the boots on the ground working with the community on a day-to-day basis. Um, some of the biggest ones we have, obviously, we have representation from the research office, from our library and museums, all of those institutes and centers, Cooperative Extension, Sea Grant, and our sustainability office. We have had community partners join our Community Engagement Council, but they really are doing that because they have joined at a time where we're working on a specific project that we want their input on. We have a different avenue in which to connect more strategically with community partners, and that is through our either our development office or our Office of Institutional Engagement, which is for those formalized partnerships where we're sharing space with community partners, for example, or we have very specific, especially statewide things that we're working on, where the focus is on the external partnerships, whereas the Community Engagement Council membership, and for the purposes of today, we're really focusing on those internal tensions. So some of the things that come up all the time in terms of tensions are, how do we track community engagement when we're all calling it different things? How do we quantify it when it is such a qualitative trust built thing? How do you put numbers to that? And how do you do that in a way that is not budgetarily restrictive? So, I would love to have GivePulse. We do not have the budget for GivePulse at this point. So our Community Engagement Council over the last year has been working with our IT department in the University of Delaware to build our own version of a tracking system to try and replicate what GivePulse does, which it does not completely replicate GivePulse, but at least to give us some more quantitative data. And that was completely birthed out of the Community Engagement Council. The definitions that we're using, so at UD, we always talk about a spectrum of community engagement work. So you might get into community engagement through volunteering. Our students do that a lot, but that is not true community engagement. It's much more transactional when we're talking about service or volunteer hours, but we don't want to discount that. And then maybe you get into an internship as a student, or you're doing a capstone class. But when we're really talking about community engaged scholarship, where we have our research office also involved, we're working with community partners on these really complex issues that our communities and our neighborhoods are facing. That's the level we ideally want to get to. But our purpose as a community engagement council is to help all of our audiences, faculty, staff, students, get to the next level on that spectrum of community engagement. So we have worked on that tracking system. We've worked on the definitions and really spelling out, even just with our Career Services Center, to help our community partners figure out what they are actually looking for and be able to, we can talk about it in the same ways with the same language. But the other thing that has come up quite a bit over the last couple of years as the budget has become tighter and tighter, I'm sure all of you are feeling that as well, is feeling like all of our different centers are competing for resources. So the council is a place where we can come and talk about, well, it feels like the administration is pitting us against each other because of the way the budget model is set up. Or my business administrator lets me give out gift cards as thank yous to our community partners, but over here in this center, they don't let us do that. Can we get systematized regulations on those types of things? And all of that is brought to us initially at the council level, and then the Community Engagement Initiative kind of funnels that up through the process, and then, of course, back down before approval. Based on those types of reactions in the council meetings, over the last 2 years, we've switched from doing monthly council meetings with that 40 plus group of people, and we've started updating our civic action plan around the kind of like yellow circles here. So supporting knowledge-based partners and or centers doing community engagement work to address societal justice, to address these big complex issues that specifically our state is facing. Tracking community engagement at an institutional level, increasing the visibility of the work that we're already doing, growing those community relationships, and then increasing the capacity for those community partners as well. We then developed and have narrowed in on 2 subcommittees. So we started with 4, realized that was too much for too few people to start out. So we now have a defining and tracking community engagement subcommittee, which that tracking system that I mentioned has been birthed out of. And then we also have a development and engaged scholarship subcommittee, which very much focuses on what are the resources, what are the libraries that we can create to help people, staff, faculty, and students build their capacity on their own, like through just behind a UD firewall, different resources, but then also what are the actual programs or professional development opportunities that we can offer as an in-person, like kind of cohort model around maybe it's promotion and tenure processes, or maybe it's how do we work together better with the resources we have. So those 2 groups meet monthly now, with the full council only meeting once at the beginning and end of each semester, whereas the actual work is happening throughout the rest of the year. And we found that to be much more successful because people have found that they're not just spending their time sitting and talking in a meeting, they're actually getting to do some tangible, actionable work. But because we have so many people that are able and willing to jump on very specific, even outside of that 40 people, jump on specific ideas, that they only have to do an extra 30 minutes to an hour of work. And then all of that combined amongst 50 people makes a lot of progress rather than just sitting in a meeting once a month. So this is just a little bit of an example of kind of the work plans over the last semester. So the defining and tracking subcommittee launched the tracking partnership. We operationalized, we just launched our community engagement definition for the University of Delaware versus just using Carnegie's, which was very exciting. And we just started a new tagging, more intentional tagging system for community engaged course design versus trying to fit it into other course tags. Professional development is advising on promotion and tenure process edits, which happen at the college level. If you remember, we have 10 colleges, so each college has a slightly different approach to community engagement and promotion and tenure. And then are working on that resource library as well. Happy to talk more about all of these things, but I do want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions and in the breakout session. So I will stop there.